Hi, it's me, Jacqueline. Welcome to my channel. If you're new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and join me at Patreon. Link in the description. Margaret looked at herself thoughtfully for a moment and then decided that perhaps she should be even more subtle with her eyes. After all, it would not do to have one of the sisters from the Holy Order of the Blessed Pain in her hip to write home again about her extravagant use of cosmetics and her unconventional sense of style. The way that her stepmother Joan had carried on, you would think she had been caught engaging in questionable behavior during Friday morning chapel. Looking at herself again in the mirror, she adjusted the lacings and the bow on the front of her blouse. She did not want to change her look. It was the perfect choice for how she felt this Friday, but it was a risk. One more letter from the Sisters of Morality and Fashion, and she might well blow the cosplay convention this weekend. The sound of her brother John's alarm clock made up her mind. She could face another tirade from her stepmother about her complete lack of awareness of their social position and her constant attempts to embarrass her parents with her outlandish get-ups. In the end, Margaret knew that there was no way to avoid an argument anyway. She might as well feel good until it started, or until it continued, as the case may be. She gently smoothed down the lace of her blouse and checked to make sure her hairpiece was on tightly and padded down the hall to John's room. Margaret had always been an early riser, as her dad called it. He said that she got that from her mom. Poor John, on the other hand, would never make it to school without her help. It was not that he was lazy or anything, he just did not wake up before about 9 o'clock no matter what. Margaret had found him many times with his feet on the floor, sitting on the edge of his bed, still sound asleep. Margaret did not really mind taking care of John because she knew he was a great kid. She also knew that, like her, he had no one else. When it came right down to it, they were the only family each other really had. Margaret and John's mother had died while having him. Since she was 3 years older, she wound up taking care of John. As soon as she learned how to do something for herself, she would naturally start doing it for John as well. Her dad said that she had done that right from the start. It was good that she had, because the never-ending parade of nurses, nannies, and governesses that her father had hired were a poor substitute for their mother. To John, no matter who might be the flavor of the week, Margaret was always there. It made them very close, but Margaret reflected every day that this was a very poor substitute for a dead mother and a father who was seldom able to show any warmth to his son. At 8 or 10 years old, Margaret completely understood that her father's distance from John was the result of losing a wife and a mother to his children so unexpectedly. She knew that it was the pain of his losing the only woman he would probably ever truly love, and not that he really disliked her brother. She had expected him to get over it. At 17, however, Margaret understood it a whole lot less than she had when she was younger. Seeing the distant way he still treated his own son had put a distance between them as well. She knew that would probably never change. It did not even bother her that much anymore. Deep down, she admitted to herself that she wanted the distance there now. It just made it easier to deal with the fact that she had lost both her parents on that terrible day. When she was 11, her father had married Joan. The woman was not exactly a bad person. She did not try to poison them or anything, but if there was such a thing as a woman completely lacking in maternal instinct, she was it. She had no talent for it, which meant that on those rare occasions she tried to act motherly, she only made things much worse. She was never able to deal with any problem. When Margaret was 13, John had gone to Joan because a teacher had been giving him a really hard time in front of the other kids. He needed help, and Margaret knew that it was the teacher and not John. Well, Joan, true to form, began yelling at John for all of the problems that she had to put up with from him, etc. It was so much worse than no help at all. Later, Margaret had pulled John aside, then almost 10, and told him that he should have come to her instead. She told him that if he needed help, he should always come to her from then on. If she could not help, she could get Dad's help for him. She also told him that if ever he was so in need of loving kindness that he could not wait for her to get there, then he could always go down to the market and buy one of those big dead fish for $10, because at least that would have some human warmth. As she padded into John's room to turn off the clock, he was sitting up in his bed, his blurry, sightless eyes staring at the mirror across from him. "Good morning, little brother. You were sleeping in your pants again?" Rubbing his hands on his jeans. "Yeah, Maggie, I did. Sorry. It does not bother me. Just don't let Joan see you. We could both use a better start to the day." "Is she up?" John asked, surprised. "I thought I heard her in the kitchen a little while ago, so yes. You get to the bathroom and into the shower, and I'll go down and get us some breakfast." "Maggie, don't bother making anything for me. I can't eat food before the pigeons are even up. You need a good breakfast if you're going to keep up that GPA, and I do it because I love you, you little squid. Now get up and get in the shower." Margaret put her hands on John's shoulders and made sure he was moving in the right direction before she headed downstairs. Joan was sitting in the kitchen smoking when she got in there. It was one of the things that Margaret liked least about her, but since she usually kept to her side of the house, at least Margaret did not have to put up with her clothes smelling like cigarettes. "Morning," Margaret said as she walked to the sink to run some hot water in one side and add some dish detergent. "Is that what you plan on wearing to school?" Joan asked in a voice that held more disinterest than sarcasm. "Yes, but I'm going to make breakfast in it first," Margaret said evenly, in a voice that held about the same amount of affection. "Do you want some eggs?" Maggie tried to make the question seem more friendly, succeeding to some degree. "No. You just make sure you get out to school on time." With that, Joan got up and shambled to the master wing, while Maggie tried hard not to shiver, and let Joan see how the hairs on the back of her neck were standing up. She went to the fridge to start breakfast. "Morning," Maggie muttered acidly under her breath. She called John down twice to breakfast before he finally did the zombie walk to the table. Eggs, waffles, and bacon would at least make sure that when he did wake up, he would be able to sit in class. "Come on, John, we have to leave in 20 minutes. Get over here and eat." She said this while checking to see that his socks matched. "Oh, yeah? Well, what about you?" John asked defensively. "I had mine between the first and second call, John, just before I washed the dishes and put them in the dishwasher." "Did you finish that paper for English?" "Yes, Maggie, yesterday." "Do you want me to look it over?" she asked. "No, it came out fine. It will be an A, I'm sure." "Okay, well, don't forget it upstairs. Put your dish in the sink when you are done." "Yes, Sister Margaret," John said with a gentle sarcasm as Maggie headed back upstairs to collect her things. A short time later, as they went out the door, she slipped a few dollars into John's pack for lunch, and they began to walk to the bus stop 3 blocks away. Looking ahead, she could see the small dark head of an Asian girl, Miyu, who she knew John really adored. "So, John, have you asked anyone out to the dance next Friday?" "Oh God, Maggie, not again. Isn't a little early in the morning, even for you?" Maggie responded softly, "Well, you know, John, most girls appreciate a little warning when a boy asks them out. Not only do they need time to get something together, but asking a girl at the last minute makes them feel like they were a second choice or something. You need to ask today, you know." "Maggie," John replied, "I'm pretty sure what girls really like is not having geeks like me bothering them." "John, you're a great guy. Don't say things like that, okay? I promise you, it won't be much longer before all of the girls in your class realize just how great you are. Trust me and give them a chance." "Yes, Maggie, I'm sure you're right. When the girls in my class get sick of the jocks, the really rich guys, the good-looking guys, and all those losers in the cool kids cliques, then I will be there, ready to take up all the slack." "Well, you listen to me, and you ask someone. I think that girl Miyu would be an excellent choice, but you need to ask someone today, okay?" "Humph," John said. "Listen, I want to stop by Noriko's place on the way, so you go to the stop and get on the bus. I'll catch the 7:40, okay? Gee whiz, sis, are you sure you don't want to hold my hand all the way down the block to the bus stop?" Laughing and patting John on the shoulder, Maggie said, "Yes, on second thought you are probably right. Take my hand, and I'll make sure you get there." With an almost dirty look, John continued down to the stop, while Maggie turned toward Noriko's apartment. Noriko was dressmaker and a very good one. When it came to costumes and period clothing, she was about the best there was. The majority of her work went to the large theater companies in the area. Noriko could take one look at a garment and reproduce it almost exactly, except hers were often prettier than the original. Most of the people Maggie knew who were into cosplay liked to make costumes on their own, but a few people who could afford it bought them from Noriko. For a few years, Noriko had also made custom clothing for wealthy clients, but she had hated that so much, she had given it up. Noriko made most of Maggie's lowly clothes and had arranged to buy others for her through family she had back in Japan. She had made the blouse Maggie was wearing and even made all her school uniform skirts for her. Maggie knew that the only reason that Noriko did the work for her was that they had been friends for so many years. Maggie always tried to help Noriko in return by running errands and sewing on beads and things, but she knew that she would always feel that she could never do enough. Besides, she loved being with Noriko so much that helping her seemed more like fun than any form of repayment. Noriko was about 10 years older than Maggie. They had met at the park one day, while Maggie was there with John. Because she was such a beautiful woman, many of the children were drawn to her and spoke to her easily. It was not too long before Noriko came to understand why the little girl and her brother were always at the park alone. From that time on, she always made a point to speak to Maggie and John when she saw them. From there, as Maggie grew a little older, she was often invited over to tea at Noriko's apartment, where of course she became fascinated by the beautiful dresses and costumes she saw there. Now, even though there were many years between them, she was the closest friend Maggie had. More like a big sister than anything else, and her apartment was a sanctuary away from home. At the door to the apartment building, Maggie glanced one more time down to the stop, hoping that John would have caught up with Miyu. She did not see him though, so she shrugged her shoulders and pulled the door open. In the foyer, she reached for the bell to Noriko's intercom, but the door buzzed before she touched the button. Noriko was at her door when Maggie got off the elevator. "Maggie-chan, I saw you coming up the stairs. You look very pretty today," she greeted Maggie the same way she had when she was a little girl. It was a joke between them. "Thanks to you, Noriko," Margaret answered. In the apartment, half of which was a studio, Noriko quickly invited Maggie to shed her outer clothing and come over to her by the window where she waited with a measuring tape. Maggie stood patiently while Noriko measured her upper body several times. As usual, she never needed to write any of the measurements down and always seemed to remember them. "Your blouses are getting tight across the front?" Noriko asked quietly. "Yes, everything is. I guess I need not have worried so much about the growth fairy after all, Noriko." Noriko blushed a little at her young friend's impertinence, but she also laughed. "I tried to tell you, Maggie, that time is the master of many such worries. You just had to wait for it to catch up with you. Fortunately, I had faith, so I left some extra cloth in the seams of several of your dresses. I can fix them in a day when you are ready." Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access.